Daredevil Born Again kind of disappointed me. As someone who loved the original show, I didn't think Born Again was bad by any means. In fact, I'd say some parts of it were pretty great, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least partially disappointed. Now, unlike most of the Marvel shows that stink, the reason behind Daredevil Born Again's struggles is pretty clear, and that's what went on behind the scenes. When the series was officially announced in July of 2022, we learned that it would be called Daredevil Born Again and that it would be 18 episodes. Charlie Cox described Born Again as a whole new thing and not a fourth season of the Netflix series, which he felt was the way to go. If you're going to do it again, do it differently. What exactly this version of the show was going to be like wasn't entirely clear. We knew Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio would be returning to play their respective characters, but there would be no Foggy, no Karen, no Bullseye, no one else. It's almost as if Daredevil was being completely rebooted with the same two actors of the original show, which is quite strange actually. Regardless, in late 2023, the series was put on a hold. Marvel had reviewed the footage and they were not pleased at all with the direction of the show. Even Cox and D'Onofrio were not happy, with Cox saying it was confusing how Born Again was not a Daredevil season 4 nor a complete reboot. The two even went to Feige and express their frustrations. As a result, Matt Corman and Chris Ord, the lead writers of Born Again, were fired from the project. Dario Scardapane, the writer for The Punisher, was brought on as showrunner for the new version of Daredevil Born Again. The team agreed that they were going to go in the direction of making this a continuation of the original series rather than a reboot. This was unquestionably the right decision to make. Fans would have been pissed if this was not a continuation of the original series. And there's also something a little morally wrong with relying on actors that people love to just reboot the entire story. Where the issues lie, however, was with what had already been filmed. Making these shows costs a lot of money. Marvel understood that the show needed a massive creative overhaul, but there was no way they were going to scrap 6 entire months of work. So, the new writers had the challenging task of writing a new story around a large portion of already existing footage. That is a problem because that's not how storytelling works. When you have a movie or show that is written properly, every scene and character and plotline flows nicely together. They all should have a purpose that serves a wider goal. When you have entire episodes that serve one story, but you're putting it in a season that serves a different story, issues are going to arise. Supposedly, of the 9-episode new season, episodes 1, 8, and 9 were exclusively from the new creative team, and episodes 2 through 7 were from the old team. Now, of course, episodes 2 through 7 were partially changed to serve the new story, but they largely maintained their original vision. In this video, I want to explore how pretty much every single issue with the show stems from the original version of the series, because episodes 1, 8, and 9 are excellent episodes. Not perfect, but really good. It's everything else that drags the season down into a show that is just fine. When the show is acting like a reboot, like the original version was, it ends up undermining so much of Daredevil Season 3. By the way, Daredevil Season 3 is one of the best seasons of television I've ever seen. It is easily the best of the original show, and it is maybe the best season of superhero TV in general. And honestly, my love for that season of Daredevil is probably why I'm disappointed with Born Again. So there are two main storylines within Daredevil Born Again: Matt's storyline and Wilson Fisk's storyline. Let's begin by talking about Matt. Matt's story begins with the death of Foggy. After our original trio is celebrating, Ben Poindexter from Season 3 shows up and kills Foggy. This scene was excellent. The CGI was definitely shoddy at times, but overall the action, the tension, the pacing, it was all fantastic. In interviews with Charlie Cox and the writers, they mentioned that the reason they wanted to kill off Foggy was because they wanted the season to begin with a big bang. After being gone for 7 years, they needed to do something right away to capture the audience's attention. This is what they repeatedly said. Guess what? I don't believe them. I believe if the writers were allowed to start from square one, they wouldn't have killed off Foggy. But because they had to work within the constraints of 6 episodes that had no Foggy or Karen, the easiest thing to do was kill one of them and have the other leave because of the fallout. There was no way Foggy would ever leave Matt, so kill off Foggy and have Karen move to California. Obviously, the writers and Charlie Cox can't say that during the press conferences, so they can say wanting to begin the series with a big bang all they want. I won't believe them. Now, regardless of this, Foggy's death is no issue. What is an issue for me is the 1-year time skip afterwards. I usually hate when stories do this. The writers made it clear that this is essentially Daredevil season 4. That means there were 3 seasons of Daredevil where we grew to love and care about Foggy. Again, killing him off is not a problem, but because we just jump 1 year into the future, we lose the opportunity to mourn Foggy. We see Matt crying on the top of the building, and then in the next scene, we see Matt honestly thriving. His law firm is doing well, he has a new nice condo or whatever. Sure, he has his internal demons, but he's largely doing alright. We eventually hear about how Matt shut himself off from Karen and the two had a falling out because of that, but we don't get to see any of that. This is my issue. Remember in Game of Thrones, spoilers by the way, when Ned Stark died, and then the next episode was entirely devoted to people reacting to this? We literally saw every single Stark react to this. That is how you follow up the death of a beloved character. We were robbed of that in Daredevil. Now, I don't blame the new writers of the show. They were forced to work around 6 episodes where Matt is never shown grieving, so they had no choice but to kill Foggy off and then jump a year into the future. As much as I dislike the time jump, it would have been way worse if Foggy died, and then in the next episode it was barely addressed and Matt had already moved on. So that's how they handled Foggy's death. I don't blame the writers, but I also don't like the path they went on, and I get they had no choice. Now, what about the rest of the season? Matt does have a defined arc, so let's talk about that. Matt goes on this arc of having to discover himself again. He feels like he lost himself after Foggy's death, and for the majority of the season, he struggles with that inner darkness. Eventually, he embraces Daredevil again at the end of the season. I don't hate this arc, but what I don't love is that in the Daredevil chronology, this is the 3rd season in a row where Matt needs to rediscover himself. Let's recap, shall we? In Daredevil season 2, Matt is struggling between balancing his life as a lawyer and his life as Daredevil. At the end of the season, he kind of loses all his friends because he was a terrible friend himself. In the Defenders, Matt forgoes being Daredevil because he acknowledges how much it hurt his personal life. Eventually, he embraces it again. In Daredevil season 3, he forgoes being Matt Murdock and fully embraces Daredevil. Throughout that season, he goes on an arc where he eventually embraces the Matt Murdock part of his life again and reconnects with his best friends. So now in Daredevil Born Again, aka Daredevil season 4, Matt forgoes being Daredevil and eventually embraces it again. If this was a reboot like it was originally supposed to be, then I don't mind repeating this arc. It's technically a new character, but because this is essentially Daredevil season 4, the writers are stuck with having to repeat character arcs. Yeah, the catalyst is slightly different than what it was before, but it's still the same arc. During the trial with Hector Ayala, it's made clear to Matt that the world would be better off with Daredevil in it. Hector talks about the importance of helping people and how he has stepped up in Daredevil's absence. This whole arc was clearly there to help motivate Matt to put his suit back on, and to realize yet again for the 5th season in a row that the institutions of justice are kind of corrupt. How many times does Matt need to realize that the justice system is flawed, and that the solution to everything is a healthy balance between Matt Murdock and Daredevil? At the end of episode 2, Matt gets into a big fight with these corrupt cops. After they beat him up and threaten to kill him, Matt taps back into the devil and kicks their ass. The scene is trying to frame it as Matt relapsing. It was a powerful scene and a well-choreographed fight, but how many times have we seen this before with the character? The 3rd episode is the entire trial of Hector. While I do think it was well done, they did get me to root for Hector, which is important. They are, again, repeating standard Daredevil tropes. Matt has a witness that the cops are trying to kill. We need to protect him to get him to the court safely. Oh, it turns out he backstabs Matt and lies under oath. Oh, there are more corrupt cops trying to influence Matt and the outcome of the trial. This whole White Tiger arc was clearly part of the original version of the show. This is not bad stuff. Again, I was invested in the trial. It's just another example of the writers repeating stuff from the Netflix run of the show. I might get some pushback on this next point, but I want to dive into it. Why exactly did Matt give up being Daredevil? Did he feel guilty for letting Foggy die? Does he blame Foggy's death on the fact that Foggy is associated with Daredevil and thus was a target? I am under the assumption that the reason Matt gave up being Daredevil was because he tried to kill someone. This is what he implies when he talks to Fisk. He says lines were crossed, and I assume that line is trying to kill someone. This was a brilliant idea, by the way. They can never have Matt kill someone. He can struggle with it, but he can't ever actually follow through with it. By having Matt attempt to kill Poindexter but fail, it's like the perfect loophole for Matt's character, because he has to deal with the mental anguish that he tried to kill someone, but he didn't actually kill someone. It was really smart. Now, what's disappointing about this is that it's a major plot point that is not addressed again until the season finale. You can establish the through line of his arc in your head. He tried to kill someone, he feels like he can never be Daredevil again because he doesn't trust himself, but events make him realize the good Daredevil brings, and he comes back and saves the day. But because the season had two different teams of writers, the middle portion of the season doesn't develop the fact that Matt tried to kill someone and how he would feel about that. The only time from episodes 2 through 7 that it's addressed was with his conversation with Frank. That's it. So when Matt does eventually put the suit back on and fight Muse, it doesn't feel like he's overcoming his biggest moment of weakness. And that's a big shame. Usually in these types of character arcs, there's a narrative trope called the ghost. The ghost is an event that plagues the character's past. So with Matt, his ghost is clearly trying to kill Poindexter. So when he fights Muse, in a way that should somehow be him overcoming his ghost, realizing that he could trust himself again, or realizing that he's not going to slip again and try and kill someone. I'm not sure, but either way, when he does defeat Muse, it should feel like he's overcoming that moment that haunted him, but that's not what happens in the show. The entire point of the Muse arc was to actually get Matt back into the suit. Muse has killed like 60 people. The cops can't find him, so Matt feels compelled to do it himself. The action was great and the tension during the fight was there, especially when Muse is abusing Heather, but as I just explained, it doesn't have the impact on Matt's arc that I wish it had. It doesn't feel like in the original version of the show that Matt was going to have a season-long arc. It just feels like mini arcs that Matt slightly changes throughout. The first arc was the Hector Ayala arc, the next arc was the bottle episode with the bank, the third one was the Muse arc, and I'm assuming there would have been more had it actually been filmed. This is really noticeable when at the end of the 7th episode, it doesn't feel like the season is building to anything. When you watch the original seasons of Daredevil, they did such a good job at building tension throughout the season. Every episode built on top of what came before until the season finale paid it all off. At the end of episode 7, I remember asking myself, I wonder what's gonna happen in the last 2 episodes. I shouldn't have to wonder about that. I should be dying to see the next episode because of the tension and the stakes that were established. The fight with Muse doesn't feel like the third to last episode of the season. It just feels like the conclusion of a short arc. Once the 8th episode ends, it absolutely feels like the season is building to something, but you only get that feeling in the last 2 episodes, never anywhere else. And shocker, the last 2 episodes were from the new creative team. Only in the 8th episode is it introduced that there was some mystery behind Foggy's death that Matt needs to investigate. If this was introduced beforehand, there could have been some more momentum in the season, but that didn't happen because of the 2 different visions of the show. The 2-part finale is without question the best part of the season. The action is brilliant, the tension is there, it feels like Daredevil. Sure, I wish the season had more finality to it instead of a cliffhanger for season 2, but it did build that tension to make me feel like, oh shit, what's gonna happen next? Now, when I was going through the season and analyzing Matt's arc, I kind of realized something. Have you ever heard of the criticism of Raiders of the Lost Ark that Indiana Jones doesn't really matter to the plot of the movie? With or without Indy, the Germans still find the Ark, open it, and all die. The only thing Indy did was accelerate those plans and kind of stall them at times. You can say the same thing about Matt in Daredevil Born Again. After Foggy dies, the first thing Matt does is try and save Hector, which he succeeds at, except Hector ends up dying anyway. Had Matt not represented Hector, Hector would have been falsely accused and killed by the cops. But Matt did end up representing Hector, rightfully acquitted him, and he died anyway. With or without Matt, Hector dies. The bank episode is hard to comment on because it doesn't really lead to anything. It's a bottle episode. Now with Muse, Matt does end up stopping Muse, but the NYPD figured out who Muse was without Matt's help. They would have gotten to him eventually. So when you think about it, all Matt did was does accelerate stopping Muse. In the two-part finale, I guess you could argue that Poindexter doesn't escape if Matt doesn't smash his head on the table and loosen his tooth. By the way, that was ridiculous. You could also make the point that Matt does save Fisk, which absolutely impacts the season finale, but what was the result of Matt saving Fisk? Fisk was able to declare martial law, which is something that a United States mayor cannot do, by the way, but I'll suspend my disbelief. This was Fisk's end goal. Yes, Poindexter trying to kill Fisk was what gave Fisk the final green light to do it, but without that, it probably would have happened anyway. If Fisk was able to turn New York City into a military state because one man tried to kill him, he would have found another reason to do it eventually. So with or without Matt, Hector dies, Muse is stopped, and Fisk becomes a dictator. You may argue that I'm making too many assumptions about alternate histories. I disagree. I want to critique one thing in particular about the final two episodes, because while the episodes were great, there was one thing that disappointed me, and that was the motivation for Foggy's assassination. So we eventually learned that Poindexter didn't just try to kill Foggy out of the blue, he was sent by Vanessa. Foggy was supposedly about to expose the Fisk's Freeport scheme, and to protect that, Vanessa had Foggy killed. There is nothing inherently wrong with that, but more often than not, character decisions like this should be more personally motivated. In episode 8, Matt learns that Vanessa was the one behind Foggy's death. Say in episode 9, Matt learns that Vanessa had Foggy killed not because of some Freeport or whatever, but because she wanted revenge. Wilson was out of the picture, Vanessa was growing in power, it had been a few years since the ending of season 3, so Vanessa thought it was time to get her revenge. She knows killing Matt wouldn't be so easy, so kill his best friend and make Matt suffer. That makes Vanessa such a more interesting character. The whole season tries to make it clear that Vanessa is really the Queenpin. My rewrite would have really nailed that point home. Also in Born Again Season 2, it makes Matt's journey a lot more personal. Instead of Vanessa killing Foggy because of business, she killed Foggy because of revenge against Matt. Imagine how much more motivated he would be to stop the Fisks. Maybe at some point he feels the urge to kill Vanessa, and he has to overcome that moment because he tried to kill Poindexter in the beginning of the show. Oh, that would be so great. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Matt's arc. The season did have the pieces for a really powerful character arc, but because of the original version of the show, it just feels like events that are happening sequentially rather than events leading into each other that crescends to the season finale. But before continuing on with the rest of this video, only 14.3% of viewers are subscribed to this channel. So if you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing for more content like this. Thank you. The other half of the season is Wilson Fisk's storyline. My views on his story are pretty much the opposite of Matt's. Matt's arc was compelling, it had a solid beginning and end, but it faltered with the execution in the middle. With Fisk, I feel like there were no inconsistencies with his arc. He began the season winning the mayoral election, and as the season progressed, he gained more power until he was able to basically become a dictator. The execution of this arc was fine. What I don't like is the entire storyline and what his arc specifically was. It frustrates me so much that Daredevil Born Again continues to go out of its way to undermine the ending of season 3. Season 3 ended with Fisk's plans of escape failing and being locked up yet again. Blake Tower famously said he will not allow Wilson Fisk to abuse the system again. Ray Nadeem gave his life so that Fisk could be properly prosecuted. That was the last episode of season 3. Born Again not only begins with Fisk out of prison, but with him becoming the mayor of New York City. How did this happen? How did we go from his arrest to him reaching the height of his powers? It wasn't explained in Hawkeye. It wasn't explained in Echo. It turns out that in the season finale of Born Again, Vanessa has a throwaway line where she mentions that Fisk was able to get out of jail because of the corruption of the FBI in season 3. What? There's no other way to describe this other than a complete undoing of season 3. Our hero's triumphant victory was simply undone because of some off-screen justification that the FBI was corrupt. I have a hot take that I have not seen a single other soul say. I do not think Wilson Fisk should have been the main villain of Daredevil Born Again. I get that this character is so captivating. I get that Vincent D'Onofrio does such a brilliant job playing Kingpin. And I get that after 7 years, they need to capture the audience's attention, so get Daredevil's most well-known villain to return again. But this is now the third time that Matt Murdock needs to defeat Fisk without killing him. Every time going forward that Wilson Fisk is the main villain of a season of of Daredevil, his inevitable defeat will be less impactful. You know how everyone was pissed off with Palpatine returning in The Rise of Skywalker? They said it not only diminished the Rebel victory in Return of the Jedi, but it also makes his defeat in The Rise of Skywalker feel flat. Like, what's stopping Palpatine from returning again? I feel the same way about Fisk. At the end of Born Again Season 2 or 3, they're going to defeat him and throw him in jail. He's already pretty much escaped prison twice. Who's to stop him from doing that again? Now, it's quite obvious why the writers brought back Wilson Fisk. If this show was going to be a reboot, then you don't have to worry about Fisk being in jail. This is why they don't explain why Fisk is free until the last episode, because they never planned on there being an explanation. But because they changed it to be Daredevil Season 4 and they couldn't throw away 6 episodes where Fisk is mayor, they had no choice but to roll with it. The season could have honestly been excellent. They could have come up with the best reason for Fisk getting out of jail. I would still have an issue with it because of the ending of Season 3. At some point, a villain needs to be defeated. They can't just keep rehashing Matt Murdock versus Wilson Fisk. Imagine if Heath Ledger didn't die, and The Dark Knight Rises begins with Joker wandering about scheming and plotting. You'd be like, what the hell? We saw him get arrested in the previous movie. I'm not saying that Fisk needs to die or that he can never show up again. If there was a new main villain and he somehow got Fisk out of prison, that would be one thing. I just wish they didn't go down the route that they went down. Also, they are double downing on undoing Season 3 by making him mayor. The Season 3 finale had Ray Nadeem put out a message talking about Fisk's crimes for the whole world to see. He was in prison for a bunch of crimes, including murder. All of a sudden now he wins an election and becomes mayor? I get what they're trying to do. The current president of the United States is technically a felon and he won the popular vote. So the new writers clearly want to say people who commit crimes can still gain power. I just think the circumstances are a bit different with Wilson Fisk, especially since one season ends with his arrest and the next episode begins with him winning said election. But fine, let's accept that I hate the foundation of this story and just analyze his arc. Born Again clearly wants to mirror Matt and Fisk with their arcs. Both begin the season foregoing their darker ways. Matt is no longer a Daredevil, and Fisk wants to change New York the right way. We see both struggle with this in the first half of the season. We see Fisk growing frustrated with politics. He just wants to get shit done. He doesn't like the whole politicking behind it. The funniest moment of the season was Fisk having to listen to those kids sing, and he's about to lose his mind. Eventually, in the 6th episode, the story contrasts Matt going back to his Daredevil ways and Fisk going back to his Kingpin ways. By the end of the season, Fisk is back as Kingpin, having complete control of the city essentially. I find this arc to be so uninteresting. The writers just had to regress his character in the beginning of the season so he can go on an arc of becoming the exact same person he was at the end of last season. I get that there was some sort of character development that happened in Echo where he tried to be a better person or whatever, and it clearly didn't work out. Guess what? I have never watched Echo, and apparently most people didn't watch Echo either. So from my perspective, Fisk just went on an arc where he became the exact same person he was when we last saw him. So yeah, I didn't care for his arc. Now, easily the best part of his storyline this season was Vanessa. It felt like a natural progression of her character from Daredevil Season 3. In Season 1, Vanessa was simply the love interest that Fisk tried to protect. She wasn't in Season 2. In Season 3, we see her show interest in what Fisk is doing, but she only scratches the surface of that criminal world. Come Born Again, she has fully embraced the Queenpin life. She is leading entire crime syndicates and making decisions for the betterment of her operation. I may have wished the specifics were a bit different, but I like that Vanessa put a hit out on Foggy. She is a threat, just like Wilson is. I love that. At first, I grew really bored with her therapy sessions with Wilson. I thought it was a waste of time, but eventually at the end of the season, they wanted to make it a point that she is attracted to the Kingpin part of Wilson. When he is trying to be good, their relationship is struggling, and when he is off being a crime boss, everything is great between the two. So in hindsight, I kind of like all of this. I need to say one more thing about Fisk's story before I move on. I might be entering nitpicking territory, but I need to say it. I don't understand how the people of New York are on board with Fisk's anti-vigilante agenda. We obviously know why Fisk wants to pass this agenda, because vigilantes are the ones that keep stopping his crimes, but for the people of New York, why would they support this? In the entire season, the only vigilantes we see are Daredevil and White Tiger, and they both have positive reputations. Hector is found not guilty because of his reputation as White Tiger, that he supposedly does good things. Somehow Fisk uses Muse as a way to garner support for his anti-vigilante agenda, but Muse is not a vigilante, he's a serial killer. A vigilante is defined as a person who takes the law into their own hands, often acting outside of legal authority to punish or avenge crimes or wrongs. Muse isn't taking the law into his own hands, he's killing people to make art. This is also the city of New York we are talking about. Remember how the Avengers saved New York a decade ago? Or how in the MCU timeline, the Avengers saved half of humanity only like 3 years ago? Why are the people of New York so against vigilantes now? It's so strange. Every Avenger is pretty much a vigilante. Anyway, overall I was not thrilled with the direction of Wilson Fisk's character. I do not think he should have been the main villain of the season. Of course, Wilson Fisk is so much fun to watch. I can watch him threatening people and committing crimes all day. But not only was his arc kind of underwhelming, it also did so much to undermine Daredevil Season 3. Now, I may have my qualms with how Matt and Fisk's arcs were handled, but without question, the biggest mistake this series made was how it handled the supporting characters. The decision to not bring back Foggy or Karen initially was an unfathomable mistake. Yeah, Matt was the main character, but Foggy and Karen were just as important to the original series. Both were excellently developed characters. Some of the best parts of the original show were all three working together to solve certain problems. Foggy and Karen really held their own. Matt is not able to succeed in any of the 3 seasons without Foggy or Karen. Team Daredevil was so much fun to watch. Over the course of the 3 seasons, we saw these two develop strong relationships with Matt. Not only that, but they became lead characters in their own stories. In season 2, honestly, it was Foggy and Karen's story with Frank that was far more interesting than Matt's story with Elektra. Season 3 was the season where the two really became excellent characters. To just throw these two characters to the side and replace them is such a risky decision. Of course, you can tell a new story with new supporting characters, but it's not that easy. And unfortunately, the new characters in Daredevil Born Again are pretty terrible. So many times in movies or shows, we see characters come and go. More often than not, the reasons viewers aren't as receptive to the new characters is because they feel like the writers are just replacing the old characters. If you have ever watched That 70s Show, you would know that Eric Foreman is the main character for the first 7 seasons of the show. In the last season, Eric leaves and is replaced by this guy Randy. When you are a fan of a show, in a way you kind of see these characters as your friends. How would you feel if one of your good friends moved away and a new guy just decided to join the group? It would feel a little awkward. You can't simply replace your old friend. That is how it feels in these TV shows. In Daredevil Born Again, after the time jump, Matt has a whole new group of friends. There's his girlfriend Heather, there's his partner at the law firm, and then there's his PI. It feels like the show wants me to think these characters have been friends with Matt for a long time, but we had just met them. And honestly, throughout the entire season, none of them get any significant development. Heather is probably the most prominent of these supporting characters. If we were to just compare her to Foggy or Karen from season 1 of the original show, does she even have a quarter of the development? No. Do you remember Ben Urich from season 1? He was an excellent supporting character. In Born Again, her niece BB is trying to fill in that role a bit, but she does almost nothing this season. It's not even addressed until the penultimate episode that the mayor was the lead suspect in her uncle's murder. I'm pretty sure this season spent more time showing clips from BB's web show or whatever than they did actually showing her. A lot of people have been talking about how much of a disappointment Muse was. I definitely agree. I cannot help but compare him to Poindexter from season 3. Do you remember how much time they spent in season 3 trying to develop him? They showed his entire backstory, what motivates him, and what traumas he has. In Born Again with Muse, his entire backstory is spelled out over an exposition dump. Instead of seeing his training when he was younger, we are just told repeatedly that he is really good at Taekwondo. That is definitely not how you develop a villain. In Born Again, we are introduced to Fisk's new right-hand man. I couldn't won't tell you his name, but what I can tell you is that he is 100% less memorable than Wesley in season 1. Honestly, all season I just kept on calling him British Wesley. In the last scene of the season, Matt and Karen walk into Josie's bar and they show a handful of the supporting characters that are going to help Matt next season. And I don't think I remember a single name of any of these characters. In the last episode of the season, it was so refreshing having Frank and Karen back. Seeing the three work together was something the season definitely needed. Of all the new characters in Born Again, I would say there were only two that I found to be engaging characters. The first would be Hector Ayala. Shocker, one of the characters they actually spent time developing turned out to be quite interesting. The guy was literally in only 2 episodes, and he had more development than any of Matt's friends who were in 9 episodes each. The other character who I quite liked was Daniel Blake, who many know as Junior Soprano. I wish they did more with Fisk manipulating him rather than him just being a complete loyalist from the start, but regardless, I actually quite enjoyed his scenes. I chuckled when he threatened all the council members in the final episode. He is totally on board with everything Fisk wants him to do. But outside of these two characters, I cannot think of any other character who was remotely memorable. I guess Kamala Khan's dad was pretty funny, but I doubt we'll ever see him again. Daredevil was known for not only having great protagonists, but excellent supporting characters. Of all the series' biggest flaws, the supporting characters may be Daredevil Born Again's biggest one. Daredevil Born Again definitely disappointed me, but thankfully the show wasn't bad, and given that pretty much every shortcoming from this season stems from what went on behind the scenes, this leaves me pretty optimistic about Born Again in season 2. They are supposedly filming season 2 as we speak, which is excellent news, so unlike some of these other shows on Disney+, we won't have to wait 2.5 years for the next season. Considering season 2 shouldn't have the issue of having multiple teams working on it, and considering the people who made the best parts of season 1 are making season 2, I have high hopes that season 2 can be just as good as some of the classic seasons. If I had to rank the seasons of Daredevil, in last place it would be Born Again with a 6 out of 10, then season 2 would be a 7 out of 10, season 1 would be a 9 out of 10, and season 3 is the best season with a 10 out of 10. So what do you think about Daredevil Born Again season 1? Let me know down below. Tune in next week where we'll look at Revenge of the Sith 20 years later. So stay tuned for that. Thank you everyone so much for watching another one of my videos. Don't forget to Night the Claude Squad, and I'll see you guys next time.